MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell is in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, while MS Now senior Washington reporter and co-host of The Weekend, Eugene Daniels, joins me here at the table. Michael, to you on the ground there in South Carolina, the president's endorsement clearly wasn't enough to put Senator Graham over the top in the primary there. She carried only a third of the Republican voters. Now the president is on his way to try to help. That gaffe was bad. How has it affected voters' views?
Peter, we've been talking to voters this morning. A lot of them are just brushing it off and saying, look, she is a political newcomer. By the way, it's something we like about her. She understands South Carolina concerns and she can learn on the job. The big question is, of course, will enough voters feel that way to push her over the finish line? As you said, President Trump coming today to rally with her 4 days before Election Day, because in that initial vote, she got in first, yes, but more than 60% of voters voted for somebody else. So there's a big question of can Darlene Graham finish the job next week? I think it's significant that we're here in Myrtle Beach, which is a part of the state that Russell Fry, who was running in the race but lost and not make it to the runoff last week, this is where he represents. This is where he had his base of voters. Russell Fry has now endorsed Darlene Graham in this race. So the understanding here and the thought here is that President Trump is trying to make sure that Fry's people get behind Graham, and that helps Graham get over the finish line. But of course, there's also Darlene Graham has a lot on the line here, but President Trump does as well. He's coming off a string of primary losses this week in Florida, in Wyoming, not to mention the fact that most of South Carolina voters didn't follow him last week. So certainly a lot to learn next week. And the president trying to give Darlene Graham this 11th hour push after that debate gaffe and after she failed to lock it up last week.
Michael, appreciate your reporting from on the ground there. Keep us up to date on what you see over the course of the next several days. Eugene, this is going to be an interesting one right now. I guess the question is, how much does Tuesday's vote tell you about President Trump's standing and how much is about Darlene Graham and her credentials?
Exactly. At this point, they're one and the same, right? My family's from Myrtle Beach. I spent a lot of time there. Bucksport is Conway, to be exact, right around the same area. And the folks there are pretty forgiving, right? When it comes to politicians, they love Lindsey Graham. And so I think the Graham name, especially because she's made sure it's in everything, is going to hold a lot of sway there. But like we saw when the couple Tuesdays ago, I think we were on set together when Donald Trump endorsed her and she couldn't get over the finish line, that does tell you that maybe there's something going on.
She only got a third of the Republican vote. I mean, that's particularly striking.
In ruby red, South Carolina. And so this has happened a little bit over and over. It happened on last Tuesday, whether or not Donald Trump's name holds as much sway. And when I talk to voters, whether it be in South Carolina, I was just in Ohio, when they see the amount of money leaving their pockets and President Trump paying attention to all the other things he's paying attention to, they like him a little bit less. And it seems like that's impacting the way his endorsement.
Speaking about people that Americans may or may not like a little bit more or less, a new Emerson College poll from The Hill shows that the vice president, J.D. Vance, is underperforming Marco Rubio as it relates to people's views on 2028, who they would support moving forward here. You got J.D. Vance going back to Ohio today, to his hometown, no less. What are you watching for, and what does it tell you about this relationship? It feels like we've been watching The Apprentice, White House edition for much of the last year.
Right. That's how Donald Trump likes everyone, kind of be begging and playing the game at the boardroom like he did with Omarosa and all those folks. But I think the thing that's really interesting about the Vance and Marco Rubio of it all, Marco Rubio has backed out of a lot of the things that have kept Donald Trump and Vance's numbers going where they are, right? You have him not engaging in the kind of in the Iran war as much as folks think a national security advisor / Secretary of State would be. And you have J.D. Vance wearing the hat of Donald Trump's homeboy. And so that makes it a little bit harder. You think of Kamala Harris, right? All the things that Joe Biden did, Kamala Harris had to wear in that election. That's the same thing that's going to happen to J.D. Vance. And so it's incumbent upon him to try to figure out a way not to distance himself from Donald Trump, but to speak a little bit differently, right? If he goes out there and he's talking about all the gold, he's going to have huge problems. He's probably going to go out there and talk about the economy. And
you don't think talking about the gold is a good strategy?
It's not working, not according to the polls.
It's not happening right now. There was a notable reappearance in the Rose Garden yesterday. I don't know, do we still call it the Rose Garden in the paved?
It's very confusing.
The paved patio
Rose
that was formerly known as the Rose Garden, right? It's like Prince. Somehow, take a look.
Good afternoon. I heard you missed me. Here I am.
There she was, Melania Trump. We have not seen the First Lady in weeks. It was striking. Some folks kept track of this. She has done half as many public events through this point of this term as she had done through this point in the first term. She has basically been invisible, and all of a sudden, there's a headline about one of the president's top aides, Natalie Harp. We'll ask you about that in a moment. And Melania Trump is front and center again. What do you make about her role and
covering D.C., right? We know how this works, right? When there is a lot of coverage of something and folks have a lot of questions, sometimes you hold hands with your partner, you're walking out. That is a visual that clearly the White House wanted folks to see. And what's interesting about Melania Trump is she doesn't like Washington, D.C. She doesn't like the White House that much. And that's been the case even since the first term. But in the second term, she has kind of made even more clear to aides that she's uninterested. And also the president knocked down the whole East Wing, which is usually where her team would be working. And so her walking out, her talking, I think even in the beginning, she joked, "Did you miss me?" Right? And so that she clearly knows that folks have been wondering where she's at.
Yeah, no doubt. So just this morning, we were speaking about Natalie Harp, who, of course, is one of the president's top aides, like the body woman, the one who's closest to him. She's the human typewriter, as it's described. The Daily Beast today published what they say are Natalie Harp's intimate letters to President Trump in full. They showed all of it, spilling her heart and saying that she is unworthy of him, adding, "You are all that matters to me." At one point, "I don't want to ever let you down." We should say MS Now has not confirmed the reporting, but we were just looking at it as we got out here. At another point, she says, "Thank you for being my guardian and protector in this life." She did have a bout with cancer, and he allowed for some experimental efforts to try to help make her well. She is well, so we're certainly grateful for that. She concludes it with all my heart. The White House, Eugene, is now responding. They say Natalie Harp is one of the most loyal and hardworking and hardest working aides on President Trump's team. They blame the fake news for attacks on President Trump and his administration and say that basically the media is to blame here. But it does raise a lot of questions, not exclusively because of these love letters, which are curious, but because of what MS Now was first reporting, which is that she is the provider of information to the president. And as we have witnessed as a function of his megaphone, Truth Social, formerly X, the president says a lot of things that aren't true based on information that people even inside say he shouldn't be given or seeing.
Yeah. One of the things that has been really interesting in the book Regime Change, Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan kind of write this moment where they're talking about polling with the president of the United States, some of his aides. And he's like, "Those aren't the right polls. Natalie, print me the polls." So that is a perfect encapsulation of what you're talking about, where people are trying to tell the president real information that is true so that he can make decisions that are best for the American people. And he's looking at some random polls that Natalie Harp is printing off for him. And that is strange. It's strange. The letters.
Well, it's the disconnect between reality and what is on the typewriter, right? What's on the printer, what's being handed to him.
And she seems fine with doing that. But you know who's not fine with it? Folks in the White House. We have reported at MS Now and other places have done the same, that they have concerns about how close she is to President Trump because of the ways in which she kind of wields her power, right? There are times where she is the one who world leaders reportedly text so that she can get information to the president. The idea that there is one aide who for a year did not have national security clearance is texting with world leaders to get in touch with the president of the United States. There's a lot of questions about that.
Let's be clear, just so people didn't miss that. For more than a year, she went without security clearance, according to MS Now's reporting. It was before ultimately the president who intervened, approved it and got it done. But it tells you a lot about her access to him and the proximity to power. We're reading through some of these letters that you may see on the Daily Beast. She wrote things like, "I want things to always be right between us. We shouldn't have to talk about work all the time." Let me ask you about someone who talked about a lot of things with Donald Trump over the course of many years. That's Michael Cohen. There is this weird revisiting of this relationship. The two of them together on a radio show just yesterday. This is Michael Cohen, the former fixer, convicted liar who served time behind bars for his attacks on President Trump, among other things. Take a listen to what part of it sounded like.
Mr. President.
Hello, Michael. How are you, Michael?
How you doing, sir? Welcome. You and I have obviously traveled a pretty rocky road together. Do you remember, sir? Boss, you remember when I was by your side? Yeah, reunited, and it feels so good.
The episode starting with, "Why can't we be friends?" and "Reunited, it feels so good." It's kind of jarring for anybody who reported on Michael Cohen, who reports on Donald Trump. Michael Cohen, I can acknowledge, called me on multiple occasions when he was trying to get a pardon from the Biden administration. I think a lot of people believe this is what the effort is related to here. But what does it tell you about these two men?
It mostly tells you that they're opportunists sometimes, right? You look at Michael Cohen, who is someone who went to jail for lying for President Trump, and then for months and years would talk to basically anyone who would listen and call Trump all types of names when he was out of power. Trump gets into power and he starts to change his tune a little bit. He wants a pardon. He told MS Now before on our air, sometime I think it was last year, that he wanted a pardon because it would make it easier for him to do the work that he wants to do. So that seems very clearly what is happening here. But it tells you that these are two folks who are very much, birds of a feather flock together, as my grandmother say. And Donald Trump has a weird way of pulling people back into his gravitational pull than anyone else in politics.
Yeah, and of course it is the one power that only the president has, the pardon power, right? And so if somebody is, as it appears, sucking up to the president of the United States and he chooses to use his pardon on that, no one can stop the president from doing as much.
100%.
Yeah, Eugene, nice to see you. Appreciate your being here, Eugene.